Marcos Antunes got out of the car so quickly that I barely remembered to lock the door. His heart was beating fast, not because of tiredness, but because of emotion. His son had been born. For years, Marcos lived inside hospitals, saving lives, as heart surgeon, but nothing prepared him for that moment. Now he wasn't just a doctor, he was a father. With a smile on his face, he entered the reception at San Vicente Hospital. The place was silent, lit only by the cold lights of the hallway. But, as he approached the entrance to the maternity ward, the security guard blocked his path. "Good evening, sir. May I help you?" The question came loaded with suspicion. "Yes, my wife just gave birth. I want to see her and meet my son." The security guard narrowed his eyes, analyzing Marcos from top to bottom. Marcos knew that look. "Her name?" "Carolina Lima, room 312. The security guard didn't move. "Do you have any documents to prove it?" Marcos blinked, confused. "I have my ID, but my wife is hospitalized. I don't have a certificate for the baby yet. He was just born." The security guard crossed his arms. "Sorry, but I cannot allow entry without verification." Marcos looked around and noticed a white man entering the maternity ward without being questioned. His stomach dropped. He didn't need any more explanations. He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Sir, I'm a doctor. Surgeon. I know. There are protocols, but I'm the father. Confirm with nursing." The security guard looked at him for a long second, and instead of answering, he picked up the radio and turned his back. Marcos felt a lump in his throat. That night, which should have been the happiest of his life, was turning into a nightmare. Marcos took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. He had spent years facing surgical emergencies, dealing with extreme pressure and making life-saving decisions. But nothing prepared him for that moment. The security guard was talking on the radio, but I didn't look at him anymore. "There's a man here saying he's the father of the patient in room 312. Can anyone confirm?" Marcos looked at the digital clock on the wall. It had been 5 minutes since he arrived, and every second away from your son, it seemed like an eternity. It was then that a nurse came out of the maternity ward pushing a crib with a newborn baby sleeping peacefully. Marcos's heart almost jumped out of his chest. "Excuse me," he called, taking a step forward. "Can you help me? I'm the father of Carolina Lima's baby." The nurse smiled gently, but before he could respond, the security guard raised his hand, preventing Marcos from approaching. "Sir, I have already asked you to wait." This time, Marcos felt his blood boil. "What about that man who came in before me? Did he have to wait too?" The security guard frowned. "That's beside the point." Marcos let out a dry laugh. "Of course he's coming, because he walked right by while I'm here being treated like I'm lying." The nurse looked from one to the other, noticing the tension in the air. "Sir, what is your name?" "Marcos Antunes." She arched his eyebrows. "Dr. Marcos Antunes? The surgeon?" The security guard changed his expression instantly. "Wait, are you that doctor that was on the news?" Marcos. He felt a mixture of anger and frustration. So that was it? Now that they knew he was a well-known doctor, did he suddenly deserve respect? The nurse took the radio from the security guard and spoke firmly. "Confirmed. Dr. Marcos Antunes is the father of patient Carolina Lima's baby. Allow entry immediately." The security guard cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Good. You can come in, sir." But Mark didn't move. He looked straight into the security guard's eyes and asked, "If I weren't a doctor, would I still be here waiting?" The silence of the answer. It was louder than any words. Marcos didn't come in right away. His heart was still racing, but no longer anxious about meeting your child. Now, it was because of the contained anger. The security guard avoided his gaze, pretending to be busy with the radio. The nurse noticed the heavy atmosphere and tried to alleviate the situation. Dr. Marcos, your wife is eager to see you. Let me accompany you to your room. But Marcos didn't move. He wanted an answer. If I were a delivery man, an electrician, a store clerk, would I still be here waiting? The security guard swallowed dry. Sir, I meant no offense. But it offended, Marcos responded immediately. I'm not naive. I saw the other man enter without any problems. He didn't need confirmation. He wasn't interrogated. He wasn't stopped. The security guard hesitated, but then he sighed deeply, exhausted. They are protocols. Marcos. He let out an ironic laugh. Funny. These protocols always seem to work one way for some and another for others. The nurse, he placed his hand on Marcos's shoulder. Doctor, your wife is waiting. Wife is... He closed his eyes for a moment, controlling his frustration. He had something more important to focus on at that moment. He took a deep breath and, without saying anything else, finally entered the maternity ward. When he arrived at the room, there was Carolina, holding little Gabriel in her arms. She smiled when she saw him. You took your time? Marcos tried to smile, but his face still carried the tension of what happened outside. He didn't want to bring that weight to that moment, but Carolina noticed. What there was? Marcos approached slowly, sitting next to her. He looked at his son with admiration, but the lump in his throat wouldn't leave. I'll tell you later. Right now, I just want to hold our son. She nodded and placed Gabriel in his arms. And, for the first time that night, Marcos felt his heart slow down. But he knew that that story wasn't over yet. Marcos stayed hours holding Gabriel in my arms. The little baby slept peacefully, oblivious to what had happened before his arrival into the world. But Mark I couldn't forget. The next day, while Carolina was resting, he went down to the hospital cafeteria to have a coffee. The weight of the night before was still on him. That's when saw the security guard again. The man was near the entrance, talking to another employee. As soon as he noticed Marcos, stiffened. There was tension in the air. Marcos, I could have ignored it and moved on. But something inside him said he couldn't let this go. He walked directly up to the security guard. We can talk? The man hesitated, but then nodded, walking with Marcos to a more private corner. Look, doctor, I already understand what happened. I made a mistake in my approach. Marcos arched his eyebrows. And why was it wrong? The security guard scratched the back of his head. We work with protocols, and sometimes we act automatically. The truth is that I suspected it because... He didn't finish the sentence. But Mark completed mentally, because I'm black. The security guard finally looked into his eyes. I never thought I was prejudiced, but after you confronted me, I started thinking. And you're right. We don't even realize when we do these things, but that doesn't mean it's right. Marcos was surprised. I expected an empty excuse, not genuine reflection. He took a deep breath and said, You know what bothers me most? It's that if I weren't a doctor, if my name wasn't known, maybe I would still be waiting outside. The security guard nodded, embarrassed. I know, and I'm sorry. Marcos crossed his arms. So, what are you going to do with it? The security guard blinked, confused. Like this? Are you going to ignore it and move on? Or are you going to try to change? The silence was long. Then the security guard sighed and looked at the hospital. What can I do to change? And it was there that Marcos realized that I had the chance to turn that moment into something bigger. Looking directly at the security guard, Marcos felt a rare opportunity before him. Often people like that man refuse to recognize their own prejudice. But now, he seemed willing to listen. If you really want to change, start by understanding why you did what you did. The security guard frowned. Do you think I did? That just because you're black? I'm sure of it, Marcos replied firmly. But that doesn't mean you're a monster. It means you grew up in a society that taught you to associate certain profiles with danger. And if you don't question that, you continue acting without realizing it. The security guard sighed and passed his hand over his face. It's hard to admit. Of course it is. And what do I do now? Marcos was silent for a moment. Then he had an idea. Does the hospital have training for employees? Yes, about safety, first aid, evacuation in case of fire. What about a humanized approach? The security guard blinked, confused. I've never heard of that. Marcos crossed his arms. Then it's time to suggest. The security guard laughed lightly in disbelief. Do you really think I can go up there and say we need a course on racism? Marcos smiled sideways. If you want, I can help you with that. The man he looked up, surprised. Would you do that? I'm a doctor. I save lives every day. But I know that changing people's mindsets can also save lives. The security guard was thoughtful. Then he took a deep breath and reached out his hand. My name is Sergio. Marcos shook his hand. A pleasure, Sergio. Let's work together on this change? Sergio nodded. Let's go. That night, when Marcos returned to the room and saw Gabriel in Carolina's arms, he felt that something inside him had also been born in that maternity hospital, a greater purpose. A few weeks later, Marcos received an unexpected call. It was Sergio, the hospital security guard. Dr. Marcos, remember our conversation? Marcos smiled on the phone. Of course. How are things? I did what we agreed. I took the proposal to the hospital director. At first, he thought it was exaggerated, but when I showed reports from patients who had been through similar situations, he accepted it. Marcos straightened up in the chair. Serious? Yes, the hospital will implement humanized approach training for all security and reception employees. And, well, they asked for a name to give the first lecture. Marcos frowned. And who did they choose? Sergio took a deep breath. You. The doctor was silent for a moment, absorbing the impact of those words. Sergio laughed nervously. I don't really know what to say, but I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't made me think, I would never have taken this initiative. Marcos. He felt something warm his chest. That night, he went to the hospital to attend Sergio's lecture. In the audience, there were other security guards, receptionists, and nurses. Sergio seemed nervous, but when he started talking, his tone was firm. When we work with people, every choice matters. Sometimes we make decisions without realizing it, based on ideas we don't even know we have. But ignorance is no excuse. I learned that the hard way, and I hope no one here has to go through the same thing. The public listened in silence. Marcos felt genuine pride. He hadn't just defended her dignity that night in the maternity ward, he had planted real change. And when he looked at Sergio there in front, he knew that the seed was growing.